Welcome to Friends with Fertility, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of fertility, reproductive health, and all the emotional journeys that are in between. I'm your host, Elizabeth King, a fertility expert dedicated to providing you with the knowledge, support, and inspiration you need on your path to parenthood. Whether you're just starting out, exploring your options, or looking for solidarity and advice, we are here for you. Let's embark on this journey together and turn uncertainty into empowerment and make friends with fertility. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to Friends with Fertility. Today we have Lynsi Eastburn. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Elizabeth. I'm happy to be here.
She is an author and board-certified clinical hypnotherapist. She has been helping people globally with their pre-pregnancy and pregnancy journeys through her private practice, books, and training facility, HypnoFertility International. As a founder and creator of HypnoFertility, Lynsi is the world's established expert in the field of hypnosis to promote fertility. I love this so much because I feel like there's so many areas that we can take this on with the mental state, the hypnotherapy in general. And I was talking to someone earlier today about someone who's on their fertility journey generally has ticked all the boxes. They're doing acupuncture, they're doing maybe speaking to a therapist, they're taking all the supplements, they've seen doctors, et cetera, et cetera. Hypnosis, I think, is still one of those areas where we know a little bit about, but we don't really know. Like maybe we've seen it in Vegas on stage or something, we're not really sure how that will equate to our fertility. So can you help us talk about what it means to somebody who's specifically trying to get pregnant?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I kind of fell into this work, and it's been more than 25 years that I've been doing this. And the first book that I wrote was for the purpose of helping people to understand that hypnosis was an option for them, because that's exactly how I ended up initially getting clients. Was I saw a stage hypnotist when I was in college or in Vegas, and I
Mm-hmm.
thought nothing else is working. Maybe hypnosis could help me. And so that, and I was like, yeah, absolutely, of course. And that's how that really got started, and before I knew it, I ended up with a specialty because no one was, like you said, doing anything with hypnosis for fertility, and we were aware that it was helpful for weight loss and smoking and even birth, and I worked in the birthing field with it, and so I was just like, "Yeah, let's go," and before I knew it, I had all of these babies showing up, and this was for people who had been told, and back then, I mean, you had some pretty dire diagnoses. There's a lot more they can do now, but women were being told they had a less than 1% chance of getting pregnant. They were told, just forget it, head home, figure out how you're going to be childless or look into adoption. And they would say to me, "I feel like there's a baby there." And I always said, "Yeah, I believe you, and we're gonna work from there." And so I started applying hypnosis, techniques that we use for things like anxiety and all the things that people are struggling with fertility struggles anyway. And before I knew it, I had a specialty. Because there was nothing out there, I ended up creating a program. I ended up teaching that all over the world, and I've trained hundreds of people since 2002 in hypnofertility. And since then, I've helped bring more than 1,000 babies into the world with hypnosis. So that's
Amazing.
kind of how that all happened.
That's great. So is everybody a candidate to do hypnofertility?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times people wonder, can I be hypnotized? I have a strong will. That's great. That's even better. And I know that all of us in this field we're aware that so many of our clients, if not all, are type A personalities or achievers, overachievers, doers, sometimes calling themselves control freaks. I'm one of them, so I get it, and that's okay because that means we're just going to do things right. We know how to follow instructions, we know how to get things done, and it's all about, do you want to be hypnotized? That's what it's all about. You don't have to be hypnotized if you don't want to. No one can hypnotize you against your will. But if that's what you want, it is absolutely so powerful and so helpful.
So does somebody come into, or maybe you do it over online now, but do they come in saying, I have this thought that I need to change? around my fertility, or do they just say, I haven't been getting pregnant and I really want to be getting pregnant? Let's help me do this. How does it
So
work? Are we
often
changing the thought pattern of the subconscious mind, or are we doing something else?
there's actually a lot of things that are going on, and often with hypnosis, people come to us when they feel like it's their last resort. And so often they don't really have any hope, they don't have any belief, but it's like, well, I've done
Tried
everything.
everything.
Yeah, nothing else I can do. That's in general hypnosis practice as well as fertility.
Hmm.
Hypnosis supports everything that you've done. So nothing that anyone has done is wasted. So if someone's been doing acupuncture, doing energy work, doing supplements, and any of those kinds of things, it also supports, of course, medical treatment, natural conception. It helps to tie things all together. I always call it the missing link. And so there may be subconscious blocks going on, or people may suspect that there's something. Early on, I heard this term unexplained infertility. And as a hypnotherapist, as soon as I heard that, I was like, great, that is subconscious mind. That is the realm of the subconscious mind. And I learned that clients did not think that that was a great diagnosis at all. Because if it's unexplained, you can't do anything, there's no reason,
Right.
there's no help, there's no hope.
It's
Whereas for me,
frustrating.
it is that's the subconscious mind. Everything else is going well. Everything should be, what should work, doesn't work kind of thing. And I have REs send people to me for exactly that reason, where it's like, okay, everything should have worked, protocols were perfect,
Structure is good.
Yep.
Everything's normal. Hmm.
Yep, and so if it why didn't it work? It should have worked, and that's where it really leads into that subconscious mind.
Amazing. And is it something that is a one and done thing? Because I feel like I remember years ago, somebody I know went for to stop smoking. Obviously, they walk out the
Mhm.
door and they know
Yeah,
that worked because they're not
yeah.
smoking anymore. With fertility, it's not like we walk out the door and it's the immaculate conception, you know. Um,
Right,
so
right.
how do they? Is it many sessions until they get pregnant? Like, what's the process?
Not to say that that can't happen or hasn't happened with those single sessions. I've even had people come in to see me, especially early on when I was doing more of a general practice, to see me for something else and end up getting pregnant,
Pregnant.
which is cool.
Hmm.
But yes,
Yeah.
smoking cessation is basically one and done. Hypnofertility, what I have found over the years is people that come to see me just don't not have anything going on. There is a lot going on, and it's emotional and it's mental, and people are feeling broken. They're stressed in so many ways. Um, I find that fertility is one of the most difficult things to deal with because it I call it the balance of biology and destiny. It's where it's people are wanting to get pregnant. There's sort of that almost romanticized idea, like I'm happy in my life and I'm ready and I want to have a baby and this beautiful child or these children are coming. And then there's also biological drive. And those things are both there. If we don't want to have children, that's fine. That's great for people who know that and recognize that. But if we do want to have them, it's very powerful. And there's such an emotional, spiritual, and physiological connection to that. So I work with people on a program of 12 sessions. And, sometimes they do get pregnant almost right off the bat, but there are so many other things to work with. And it depends on their background. But if there's been, even one miscarriage, multiple miscarriages, if there's been just so many things that can happen with people. There's the fear of, I'm pregnant, but I need to stay pregnant.
Right.
There's all of these milestones, and there's a lot of fear out there that people are already basically hypnotized with or programmed with, which is, age, is statistics, is all the things that have happened to other people, because
Right.
the subconscious does not discern between so-called reality, and I always have to say, reality in air quotes, and the imagination or the subconscious, which is when you are supporting someone or experiencing something or reading on the internet what people have gone through, you're going through that yourself in your own subconscious mind.
Right.
So there is so much more going on than getting pregnant or getting the positive pregnancy test results. So there's still so many things to align, people with to help them release, to help them feel confident. So many people lose confidence so badly. And just one of
Mhm.
the most standard things I would hear from people is, I feel broken.
Right.
Something's wrong with me, and I can do anything, and I can't do this. Well, you can't do a baby. And I would always say, you can't left brain a baby. So yes, you can go to university, you can get the degrees you want and the grades you want and the job you want and the partner you want and all of that, but you can't apply that to having a baby. There's an intention, but there's also a receptivity there. And I call it the balance of intention and surrender. So that's so much what I'm working with. And then also, they don't always get pregnant right away. Sometimes there's preparation going on for something medical. There might be surgeries. There's just so many things, or there's a retrieval, but then there's a process of waiting maybe for genetic testing or other things. There's so many variables that go on. So, yeah, I don't have a magic wand.
Mhm.
Hypnosis is very effective and it's known as a rapid change therapy. But yeah, that's the way that I do it and have been doing it for several years now.
And it's, I think you bring up such a good point that I talk about often too, is as great as social media is for a lot of reasons and getting social evidence that it's possible to have a baby over 40 or whatever it is that you're looking for social evidence, you also can't unsee all the other noise that's out there. And so
Exactly.
you don't even recognize that you're taking that in.
Yeah.
And it is so powerful, the things that we see visually and read, etc., that you're kind of having to unravel those things when you're going on a fertility journey because, like you said, you don't even know that you've taken that in. You don't even know that this doesn't belong to you, but you've now taken it on. So I think that process of, 12 sessions, even if it's like you're taking a nap for for 10
Yeah.
of them, right? Like I always say, there's nothing wrong with that. Your body needs to relax and your nervous system needs to calm down, but really there's a lot that needs to be unloaded. And
Mhm.
I think even if you're not on a fertility journey, right, just our
Right.
day-to-day
Right.
information download now is just
Mhm.
sad to say, not the happiest stuff out in the world these days.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's so difficult. There's just so many things that are going on for people. And yeah, so much of it needs to be cleared. And if we don't do our work, then all of this gets passed on to the baby.
Right.
And, so many people think that, because there's other things going on in their lives, they're not just trying to get pregnant in a vacuum, right? There are other things, even though they may become so focused on it, that
Right.
this is it, and when I get pregnant, that's gonna fix everything. And when I have this baby or these 2.2 children or whatever it is that they've got in their mind, everything's gonna be fine. But that's not necessarily so, and if we do not do our work, then, our children are going to struggle with that, and we're gonna struggle with that because also the longer people try to get pregnant, the more they tend to romanticize this baby in their mind. And the more this baby is almost seen in their mind as like this little angel, this little cute being that is, kind of sitting on the bed sort of thing and just quiet, and they're real babies. There's the whole spiritual component, and I do the spirit baby work within my work as well. But they're also human babies, real babies. They cry or they get sick or they don't sleep. And so often what happens with people trying to conceive with women is they become envious or upset with other people. You're seeing babies everywhere.
Right.
And why did that person have a baby before me? Or that person's younger than me or older than me. I should have been first. Or why does my sister have three and I haven't had my first one yet? Or that person over there is just drinking Coca-Cola and eating chips 3 times a day, and how come they have 5 kids and I don't, right? So there's so much of that that's going on with people's struggles, and so we do need to clear that, and people feel bad when they get upset with other people. So, I remember a client in particular saying, I ran out of the restaurant because there was a baby crying and the mother didn't stop it, like didn't take care of it right away. And I mean like this, right? Instantaneous. The poor mother hadn't even had a chance to do anything and my client was triggered because and I'll hear things like, I don't care if my baby cries for 24/7 for 6 months. That'll be fine, but it won't be fine. It's not fine. But again, waiting so long, it does tend to, romanticize this idea that this is going to fix everything in my life and
Right.
everything is going to be perfect. And that's a lot for a baby to carry.
Agree. And also I think that leads to a lot of the postpartum, right? Because they
Mhm.
think I'm not allowed to feel any other way other than blissful. And I'll tell you,
Right.
it's not that way. Most of the time it's not blissful. You would like to think
No.
that it is, but I think especially if you've gone through a fertility journey, you think I'm not allowed to
Yeah.
feel frustrated with my
Yeah.
child, or I'm not allowed to feel like I need a break, which they're not even related, right? They're two separate
Mhm.
planes completely. One is
Exactly.
not associated with the other. And it's very important for you to get a break. It's very important for you to feel natural feelings around something you don't know about. Most of us don't know what we don't know before you have a baby. So it's not
That's
easy.
it.
Um,
Yeah, that's it, and it can be so competitive, and like what you mentioned with Facebook or social media, I mean, I see these things on, like, Instagram, for example, and there are these handles that people have that are like, "Empty womb, empty crib," or but I'm
hmm,
just making this up, I don't know if anyone has that one specifically, or, "Never going to have a baby," or and well, hypnotically, you're reinforcing
right,
that every time you look at that, and
right.
it is really easy to get into those emotions that are really heavy and messy. And it's not that we shouldn't process them, but of course, people want to not process them. And yet they're still reinforcing them to themselves. So it's
Right.
actually multi layered. There's a lot that goes on. And I work with the brain and helping to rewire neural pathways and just, repetitive thoughts and being able to release those or reframe the way that we're thinking or looking at things, as well as at the subconscious level, removing blocks, releasing blocks that might be there, might not be there. But even if you think they're there, there's something to that. Then you work at very deep levels to help with the healing of the body and organs, systems, cells, like all the way down. We work with that. And so there's so many things, and it's circular. It's not like it's linear. It's not like we do this first and this first and this first. They all work together. And so what comes up and needs to be addressed, we work with as it does. And then it's funny because things can be taken care of that we haven't touched. People
Hmm.
get the idea, well, I'm in cycle day 1, so I need to do cycle day 1 specific meditations or hypnosis, and now I need to do ovulation ones, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't
Right.
matter at that level. In the subconscious, everything's happening now, everything's present.
Right. Which two things I want to touch on. One, the handles that you mentioned. I know for a period of time I was reaching out to people to say, you might not want to call yourself infertile Elizabeth, change it to fertile, or like
Right,
just
right.
that simple, I've always
Mhm.
said with my business, I don't say infertility or whatever, because I do think that there's energy behind that. And then second to that is just you talking about the spirit babies and that whole other aspect of things that I really tune into also. And I think that is such a healing aspect for a lot of people that are
Mhm.
on the journey or maybe have lost, um, from miscarriage or stillbirth or whatever it may be, to find some hope as well when they get those messages from spirit babies. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do in relation to that, and what does that look like?
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing for me. And my son, who will be 32 in a couple of weeks, came through to me as a spirit baby way back.
Oh.
And I wasn't, supposed to have this second child, and he came along and said, "Hi, I'm your baby. I'm a boy. My name's Dylan, and I'm coming." And I said, what? Who are
That's
you? And wait,
cool.
no, that's not happening." And he said, "It is happening. So make it happen. Get to it. Whatever it is that you need to do." And that is exactly what happened. It's so funny. He calls himself the first hypnofertility baby, and really he was. And the whole hypnofertility stuff started to come in. It had to be at least 5 years after he came through. So 6 years maybe after he originally contacted me, if you wanna call it that.
Hmm.
And when the women first started coming to me, when they would say, "I feel there's a baby there. I just know there is," and I believe that. If you
Hmm.
feel it, it's because they're there. They're contacting you, or they're energetically connected, and maybe the alignment is off or whatever, that might be. things like that. And so I always would work from there. When I was a child, I was always aware of, I guess, spirit babies and babies. I just had this thing. And when I was 9 years old, I tell this story a lot, but I remember this clear as if it happened an hour ago. And I was sitting in the back seat of my parents' car and the radio was on. And they announced that the first test tube baby, as they called her at the time, had been born in England.
Hmm.
And I just snapped to attention. What? Oh my gosh, thank goodness. Now, no one who really wants a baby will ever not be able to have one. Now, how many 9-year-old kids care
Aw.
anything about that, or
Right.
that it's really going to grab their attention? And
Right.
and so it's funny because the way the work that I do began, it's like hypnosis. It's not linear. It started over here and it was over there. And and as I worked with people and I was really into the art and science of hypnosis. It's, very much a scientific and psychological practice, but it is also very spiritual. And these babies would show up, and I really didn't pay all that much attention to that per se. I mean, I work as I work,
Hmm.
and more they started to come in more clearly. So when I wrote my first book, it was, let's let people know that hypnosis is an option. Let's get that out there. And and there was a spirit baby, I guess, event you could say, that happened when I first began doing this as well, because I was in general practice and I realized that once I released this book, I was going to end up focused on fertility. And I wasn't sure because it came to me. And I do know that when spirit brings you something, you need to pay attention. And if you don't, it's going to come to you again. And if you don't pay attention to that, you're going to get a boulder dropped on your head. So, but at the same time, it's like we have free will. So I'm like, do I want to do this? And so one of my clients, I had met at a I did this like a little group session in a spiritual store. I think it was like group past life or something like that. And then she came to me. She found out that I did this work, and she came to get pregnant, which she did. She came to do the birthing with me. She came back afterward to lose the baby weight, and and then she ended up training with us. And so my husband and I have a hypnotherapy training center, and then I train in hypnofertility. So she ended up training with us, or working with us and seeing clients at our clinic, and her baby is actually on the front of It's Conceivable, and he's in his 20s now. um,
Fun.
but I said to her, would you do a life purpose regression for me, because I really need to check this out spiritually, as to, should I release this book? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And we did that process, and in my life purpose regression, the spirit babies came to me, and I saw my book sitting there in this like library. And I have a library behind me because I'm very book focused. So I guess that was my imagery. And then I saw one of the spirit babies putting a spirit baby into the body or the being of one of my clients that I was currently working with at the time.
Hmm.
And so I understood that I was definitely to be doing this work. So that is there within the first book. And then
That
it
sounds like a
moved.
very clear message.
Yeah, yeah, I don't think it gets much clearer than
That's amazing.
and then from there it got more and more spiritual, where the babies had more say, or they were being more vocal, and the divine feminine work and the spiritual work, the angel work, all of that was coming through more and more. And so my second book ended up going that direction more. It was like the evolution of hypnofertility and
Right.
enveloping that part. And that went on. I think I released that in 2012 or 13. And then that continued on. And I was never attached to, is it a indigo baby? Is it this? Is it that? It just didn't matter. It was that tuning into this being. And in about 2016, it was sooner than that I was seeing these babies, and a lot like sparkling orbs floating around or flying around my office. And again, I wasn't attached to them being anything in particular, but around
Right.
2015 or 16, I learned that I was working with a particular group of babies, a particular cohort, if you want to call them that, species. I don't know. They don't really care. And they're called the Pink StarLights. And so they then came through, and it was, you guys, you have to get our message out to the world. And, I'm very left-brained myself, type A, linear, cerebral sometimes. I'm a Capricorn. So I'm like, are you kidding me? And so I've always been spiritual and open to all of this kind of stuff, but it was still that, seriously? And and so that's what ended up happening. They gave me their name, and then they downloaded a book to me.
So did you
And
feel initially that they were like you were channeling this group, or and then
I
obviously
I
with the book
I
that
think
sounds
so.
like
I'm
what
I'm
that
very
was.
claircognizant, so
Okay.
it drops things drop into my mind, so I'm almost not aware that they're psychic or intuitive or anything like that, because 'cause they're just there, unless I think about it and go, "How do I know that, and where would I know that from?" And that's, not something I, learned in school or or in everyday life, right? So, yeah, they gave me their name, Pink StarLights, and they said that was from a very, very, very high frequency of light and love that they're bringing through, and their very specialized purpose, which is to help elevate the energies of Earth. And we're going through, and you mentioned that a little bit in the beginning, we're going through a lot right now. And we have this breaking down of this old patriarchy. And this is like not a male female thing. Like I'm not, anti man or male or anything like that, but it's that energy that's so off balance and out of whack. There's so much aggression, volatility, oppression, greed, anger. There's all of this that's been going on. And it's been going on for a long time. And it's just been getting worse. And it's hurting Earth Mother, and it's hurting us. And so that is part of their major focus, is to bring in this high, high frequency love and light. And then they explained to me that their mothers, so the average age of my clients these days is about 45. So when someone says, I'm 39, well, you're a baby, to me. And people have been struggling. They go through what I call an initiation. It's very difficult. The clients that I work with have been through a lot, an arduous journey, if you will, and it may have gone on for a long, long time. There may be have been a lot of trauma involved, and so this healing is needing to happen for them to hold this light level of these babies. And so that's what they were really having me focus on more and more, and come to realize more and more. And I always say my babies are my clients. Their moms just get to pay the bill. They kind of drop them in front of me, and it's always interesting of how people find me. That's always kind of fun to find out. So, yeah, that's how that ended up sort of coming together. And so their book, Waiting in the Wings, introducing the Pink Starlights, was what I released. They downloaded this book, then they took 4 years of changing it up to let me publish it, which was really interesting. So it was evolving, but they show up in my work. Can I do spirit baby readings? Yes. But what tends to happen is they show up when I'm working with my clients. They also
Right.
show up if I'm at the bank or in the grocery store, and all of a sudden they're flying around people. I tried to be like, I'm not getting into that,
Mhm.
but they do show up in the work that I do. And so aligning with them through hypnosis is also a really significant part or piece of what I do.
And when you are working and they show up, are you communicating that to the mom at that time that they're here, or is it something after? How does that work? Or do you not mention it to
Yeah.
them?
Early on, I didn't mention it because, like I said, I thought I was maybe insane. Uh, I thought I was getting migraines, but then migraines never happened unless I was in the office with a client or on oh gosh, what did I use? I've been doing online since '07, so I think it was Skype back then.
Right.
Um, and so I would think, okay, that's interesting, right? And then eventually I did start telling people about them, and I found that they really wanted to hear that. They
Right.
really liked to know that. So usually I'll just check in with people to see where they're at and what they're wanting to know.
Hmm.
But spirit babies has become so much more almost household at this point. So back in the 90s or before that, you might hear of a psychic that said, "Oh, you're gonna have 2 boys and a girl," or "You're gonna have, 1 child," or whatever,
Right.
different things like that. And people would say, well, I had a reading with someone.
Right.
And then Walter McKitchen, I think that's how you pronounce his name, wrote the book Spirit Babies, which I'm pretty sure you're familiar with. Pretty much everyone is familiar with that. It
Mm-hmm.
came out at the same time as my book, the first one.
Okay.
And so I would meet people who had talked to Walter, and I would just kind of incorporate that stuff into his or into my work with them.
Right.
And then as I started to see them more clearly in this, they started to come in more presently, I guess you could say. I was thinking, this is not what I do. I'm the hypnotherapist. I focus on, this stuff. And then I had found out that Walter had crossed over. And so that was right when they had started to really show up in my office and with me and for
Mm.
me. And my clients were getting messages, even from Walter, which was really interesting.
Yeah.
There was just so much interesting things happen. So as they popped in more and more, I would mention them, bring them in, and then now, as I said, there weren't spirit baby readers per se.
Right.
Now there's tons of them, spirit baby readers, spirit baby mediums, all of that kind of thing, which is fantastic because there's so much awareness of this now rather than something sort of just offhand. Not to say that psychics or general psychics weren't correct or helpful, but now it's become a thing.
Yeah.
So I
And
do,
I think it's like I said before, it's healing for a lot of people too that are going through the
yeah,
process if they're open to that. But
exactly.
I
And
think
they just
that's
are more and more. So many people are just more and more open. And even when I first got started, the clinics they weren't really into anything too much, right? It was the medical and Western
oh
medicine,
yeah.
and this is it. And people would ask, and what happened with HypnoFertility is my clients would bring my information to these clinics, and they'd be like, you know, and people would say, oh, what if I do hypnosis, or what if I do Reiki, or what if I do something else? And they'd say, well, it won't hurt you. And now it's shifting where they're realizing too that there's a lot of benefit to this work. And I did a second edition of my first book, and the foreword is written by a reproductive endocrinologist. And then when I did Waiting in the Wings, which is totally spirit baby stuff, it also has a foreword by an RE.
Amazing. I
So
love to hear that.
that has just like shifted so
Right.
much.
That's amazing. How can people find you, work with you, learn from you, etc.?
Well, I do have a website, which is hypnofertility.com. So that's probably the easiest way.
Okay.
I have Instagram, but I have gotten sort of behind on that lately. Just so many things, to keep up with. So that is probably the easiest way is to
Okay.
check out the
Wonderful.
website.
Well, it sounds like, I mean, from what I just got, I want to like send everybody that I know who I'm working with to just say, let's do that next and see what happens. Because I think that there's so much goodness to come out from the work that you do in lots of different ways. Even if it isn't from having the baby, maybe there's something else that is revealed to them in the work that you do. And I think that's always a benefit. But I really
Oh, yeah.
appreciate your time and sharing what you do. And I think it's so unique and really grateful.
Well, thank you. And also, if they're interested in the Pink StarLights per se, the Waiting in the Wings book, there are some journeys in that book as well. So they can read about them and learn about them, and they can also do some exercises or journeys for themselves.
Fun. I love that. I also am super into all of that stuff. And yeah, so you're speaking my language right now, Lynsi. So I'm super
Oh,
excited about
that's
that.
that is so awesome, and they're always telling me what to do. I joke around that they're bossy, but they've got me at a point now where they're like, "You need to," because I train hypnofertility practitioners, they're like, "Now you need to train Pink Starlight
Oh,
practitioners." Like,
right.
"Oh, really? Okay." And then what they do is download me a whole entire course.
Oh, amazing.
Like,
I
"Yes, let me
mean,
just get right on that, guys."
yeah, in your additional free time, right? Okay. Well, have a wonderful evening. And again, thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge and information. And we'll meet again.
Thank you, and you too, and thanks so much for this amazing podcast. I know it's so helpful, and the episodes are just wonderful. I've really enjoyed
Oh,
them.
thanks, Lynsi. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Friends with Fertility. We hope that you found the stories, insights, and tips as inspiring and informative as we did. Remember, you are not alone on this journey. Your friends with fertility are here for you. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to follow us on social media for updates and more fertility resources. Until next time, stay hopeful and keep believing in your journey, and know that we are sending you lots of love.